What's up, gamers? This video was meant to be uploaded last month, right? In anticipation for, the 2024 election. But I decided maybe I shouldn't because I had cooler videos planned, such as Sonic X Shadow Generations review, that obviously trumps election history videos. But yeah, I just wanted to do this because I'm a big ass nerd and I'm interested in history and politics in general. So here is the story of the 1876 election, one of the closest in American history and probably the most corrupt. Let's get straight to it. All right, so for context for this 1876 election, more than 10 years before 1876, we had something called the American Civil War. It's pretty well known, deadliest conflict America has ever been in. Kind of a big deal around these parts. And it was a big deal back then too because the South had been absolutely destroyed. Like, they got their absolute asses kicked. Most of their infrastructure was destroyed, and they went into a period known as Reconstruction, which is pretty much involves the North military, the Northern military occupying the South, and military rule pretty much for like the next 10 years or so around that time. And during this time, they enforced militarily and, forcibly enforced black enfranchisement. And that means just black men being able to vote and, them not being racially targeted and shit, and integrating them into Southern society. And obviously, Southern people then were not a fan of that because, they were not progressive people, to say the least, and I just did not want that. And so they were unhappy with the North, forcibly, forcing their will on the Southern people and whatnot. Even though, it's not that big of a deal. Fucking grow up, guys. But, that was like 150 years ago. What can you do now? But so the Southern people are angry that the North was pushing, being accepting of other people onto them and disrupting their way of life. And, electing Republicans to the government, which I'll explain that later. So that's the context to lead up to this election. Now, the president during all this time, after Lincoln got assassinated, his vice president, Andrew Johnson, succeeded him. One of, if not the worst president in American history. Dude fucking sucked at his job. And Johnson was actually the first president to be impeached and was saved from being kicked out of office by one vote, which is insane. American politics during the mid-1800s was crazy. But after Johnson, Ulysses Grant, the former general of the Union Army, was elected president. Now, Ulysses Grant, he did 2 terms in office, wanted to run for a third one in 1876, but was denied by the Republican Party because at this point, no one wanted a president for 3 terms. 2 was the unofficial limit. And so he was out. And so they picked just a random fucking dude. I'm pretty sure he was a senator or a governor. I think he was the governor, may have been a senator. But he was the guy of Ohio. Rutherford B. Hayes. Weird name. Can't lie. Killer beard, though. That's who the Republicans, they nominated him, and they also nominated William Wheeler, as his vice president. And then the Democratic Party, since all the southern states by this point had been reintegrated into the Union as like full states, I think. Fact check that, Zumbini, in editing. Everyone was gearing up for this election. They wanted, it pretty much determined the future going forward for an entire region of the United States. And so the Democratic Party, they elected the former governor, or former, I'm pretty sure, Samuel Tilden. And I don't remember who his VP was. It's someone named, I think it was Thomas Hendricks. Someone named Hendricks. And so the thing was, both of these guys were rather popular. It seemed like a pretty close election. And it got to the point where it seemed like there was going to be another civil war. People were talking about that. They were like, I'm going to split up again if fucking Rutherford B. Hayes doesn't get elected to office. And this was worrying, of course, if they had just started fixing themselves after the first Civil War. It had only been like 11 years since it ended. Nobody wanted the Union to split up again. That was just going to be a whole Heap of bullshit no one wanted to go through. Election day comes. It is Hayes versus Tilden. This is a very close race. People were hyped up about this. They wanted their candidate to win. If they didn't win, they were going to do something drastic or break away from the union or kill the guy or do something. I don't know. Things were very tension-filled at this point. And then the polls came in. Samuel Tilden won the popular vote. But if you know anything about American politics, you'll know that the popular vote does not determine who the president is. That's just a popularity contest, pretty much. But people could give a shit about the popular vote, really. What really matters is the Electoral College. And now this is a system of which was put in place whenever we rewrote the whole thing, the laws of the country. It's pretty much listed in the Constitution and whatever other important documents. It pretty much is, states have different populations and whatnot, and they're different in sizes. And so a certain state is given a certain amount of votes, depending on population. Like a state like Massachusetts would have, like, let's say 3 votes. And a state like California, big fucking state, millions of people there, would have 10 votes. And so if California chose Butt Fart Tickle Hole over Massachusetts choosing Samuel Bartholomew III, you know, more votes would go to Tickle Fart or Tickle Hole. Yeah. And so that's pretty much the Electoral College. But see, where the problem lies in this is that the majority of people might vote for one guy, and then the Electoral College people will vote for a completely different one. And depending on how many big states vote for the one guy, that guy can win the election, and he could like get 0% of the popular vote, and then no one's happy. And that is kind of what happened here, because they were pretty close though. But Samuel Tilden beat Hayes by like a few 100,000 votes, I believe. They both had 4 million votes per guy. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, Tilden's got this in the bag, bro, trust. Tilden did not in fact have it in the bag, because the results were in. Despite Tilden winning the popular vote, everyone thought he had this in the bag. And when the first count of the electoral votes happened, he did. He won with 180, I believe, and Hayes had 165. But apparently this was contested, and recounts were done in Oregon, South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. Unsurprisingly, like 3 southern states had to do some bullshit now, and strangely Oregon. Now, none of these states necessarily had huge populations. Florida now has a huge population, but in the 1870s, no one wanted to live there because it's hot as fuck, and you know, AC isn't a thing. But these states, no matter how small they are, no matter if it's like 3 electoral votes, still pretty important when it comes to the grander scheme of things. And after the recount, it was found that Hayes had won all 4 states, which was mind-boggling, because this means that Rutherford B. Hayes won the 1876 presidential election by 1 electoral vote. What the fuck? Lost the popular vote, lost the electoral vote until he was like, I demand a recount, and then won by 1 fucking vote. Mind-blowing. Now see, how he did this is, you know, they had a whole crisis over this, like, oh, we need to recount these votes really fast. So the Senate set up a electoral committee, right? But what Hayes did is, because he was part of the Republican Party, which was, you know, in control of the South forcefully at this point, he met with Southern leaders in South Carolina, and Louisiana, and he was like, hey, if you guys give me the electoral votes for your states and help me win this shit, I will end Reconstruction, and you guys can just do whatever you want for the rest of time, and the federal government will have no interference. And they were like, absolutely, yes. And then they signed it all off, you know. And I don't know what the fuck Oregon was doing, but that's pretty much how Rutherford B. Hayes won the election, by being a dirty fucking cheat. And this was called the Compromise of 1877, better known as the Corrupt Bargain, because this dude was absolutely an asshole for doing this. Not only did he sell out, you know, Samuel Tilden, poor fucking guy, he sold out progress in the southern United States, which probably would not have gone completely great if Reconstruction persisted, but it would have had some sort of meaningful, long-lasting progress. But after this compromise, Absolutely not. After the North, what the hell? After the North left and military rule ended down there, all the Republican governors were gone. All the black people that were ever in office, gone. You black men, you thought you could vote? Not anymore. Jim Crow laws are in place now. Segregation, disenfranchisement, pretty much default Democrat victories everywhere in the South. Like if you were running for like Georgia, or the governor of Georgia as like a Republican candidate, what the fuck are you doing? You realize you're not in Ohio, right? And so this is pretty much what I'm talking about. And this is why I wanted to talk about this election, because not only am I a big fucking nerd when it comes to political stuff, right? But this is just so mind-boggling, is that we could have had way more progress faster and sooner, and this whole Jim Crow segregation bullshit could have been over way faster if Rutherford B. Hayes just sucked it up and took it like a man and lost the election. Now, I don't know what Tilden would have done. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the guy, right? But seeing as he's a Democrat, I don't know. Maybe he would have done the same thing. But we don't live in that timeline. So I'm going to have to immediately like Tilden, as, you know, he's not the one that sold out, you know, minorities in the South. And, you know, I just think it's fucking crazy. Because not a lot of people know about this. Not a lot of people know that Rutherford B. Hayes is in my top 10 worst presidents list. And a lot of people just don't know who Rutherford B. Hayes is. But they really should. Because he's fucking terrible. He was a mediocre president. Name one thing he did, besides have a beard. Having a killer beard was the only thing he ever did. And also screwed over every black person in the southern United States. What an asshole. But, this was just a quick little tidbit video. I wanted to talk about this because, like I said, it was an interesting little tidbit, and my little autistic brain was like, oh. So yeah, this was like another short form video, hopefully, not 10 minutes or less, like I used to do back in the day, back in the olden days. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this little history video. Like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. God bless, and bye-bye.
Away down south in the land of trade.